It began, as it often did with Rick, in the ruins of a forgotten world, an alien desert littered with broken spires and crumbled towers that time had erased from history. The sands carried whispers of civilizations older than Earth, older than any charted galaxy, and yet Rick's scanner pulsed with an energy signature so archaic it might as well have been carved into the bones of the universe itself. The relic lay half-buried beneath a dune, a monstrous shape of wood and brass, eroded yet unmistakable in design. It was a horse, not a statue, not a crude carving, but a machine forged in the image of one, its hollow belly laced with mechanisms that ticked even after millennia. Its surface bore runes that seemed to crawl when the light touched them, twisting from ancient Greek into indecipherable alien tongues. Rick wiped the dust away with an almost reverent hand. "Typical," he muttered, though Morty wasn't there to hear him. "Humans thought they invented the Trojan Horse. Figures it's just another borrowed artifact." But something about this construct unsettled him. It wasn't the way its hollow eyes reflected starlight, nor the faint hum that vibrated through the sand. It was the feeling, an almost psychic itch, that the thing was waiting. When he powered it on, the desert itself seemed to vanish. Darkness surged, and Morty, dragged along reluctantly as always, felt reality peel away. They weren't in the desert anymore. The air grew heavy, thick with the metallic tang of blood and smoke. Before them stretched a vast battlefield, fires licking the horizon, the clash of swords echoing from every direction. The Trojan War, or something masquerading as it. At first glance, it was the scene from history books, armored warriors screaming, walls of Troy illuminated by flames. But the longer they stood there, the less human the soldiers seemed. Their shadows moved before their bodies did. Their faces blurred, half masks of flesh and half stretching voids. Rick's eyes narrowed. This wasn't history. It was memory, warped, corrupted, and alive. The horse towered at the gates, but it was no gift of strategy. Its surface pulsed as if it were breathing, each wooden rib flexing like muscle. The Greeks didn't build it to infiltrate Troy. They built it to contain something, a prison locked with ritual, myth, and blood. Morty gagged at the sight of corpses writhing even after death, their whispers weaving into the crackling air. "Rick, this isn't right. This isn't quiet," Rick snapped. His usual arrogance faltered, replaced with something sharper, caution. He understood now. The horse wasn't a symbol of cunning victory. It was a seal, a cage built to hold something that shouldn't exist, and that cage was breaking. The battlefield trembled. From within the horse, a sound like grinding stone and shrieking metal tore the air. A chorus of voices, thousands speaking in unison, none belonging to mortals, called out not in Greek, but in a language that scraped the edges of sanity. Rick grabbed Morty's shoulder. "This isn't a reenactment, Morty. This is a lure." And the realization struck cold. The relic they had unearthed wasn't just showing them the past. It was pulling them into it, binding their consciousness to a war older, deeper, and far darker than Homer ever dared to write. The Trojan War wasn't fought over Helen. It wasn't fought for honor or glory. It was fought to keep the horse shut, to keep the entity inside from tasting freedom. And now, as cracks spread across the colossal construct, Rick felt the weight of destiny clawing at him. The horse wanted out, and it wanted him. The vision did not release them. Instead, it deepened, pulling Rick and Morty through the smoldering fields of Troy as if gravity itself had chosen a new center. The air reeked of iron and ash. Fires licked the night sky, yet the flames gave no warmth, only shadows that swayed and writhed against the crumbling walls. Morty stumbled over the fractured stones of the battlefield, his breathing ragged. He tried not to look at the bodies. They weren't corpses in the way he expected. Some still twitched, clawing at invisible chains. Some had no eyes, only hollow sockets from which black ichor dripped endlessly. Others opened their mouths in silent screams, their jaws stretched too wide, teeth glistening like broken glass. Rick pressed on, his face unreadable. He'd seen horrors across dimensions, wars that shattered timelines, creatures whose minds could swallow planets whole. But this was old, older than myth, older than the stories humanity wrapped in poetry to disguise their fear. The Trojan War was a mask, and beneath it lay something primal. The Greeks and Trojans weren't fighting each other anymore. Their swords clashed, yes, but their eyes were fixed not on the enemy across the field, but on the looming horse. Every strike, every cry, every death was part of the ritual. The war wasn't about victory. It was about containment. Rick stopped at the edge of a trench filled with bodies. The soil writhed as if worms the size of veins burrowed beneath. "This isn't a memory," he murmured. "It's a system, a machine. The war is still happening because it has to happen. If it stops, the lock breaks." Morty shivered, hugging himself. "Rick, you mean this war is like fuel? It just keeps going forever?" Rick didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the horse. Cracks had spiderwebbed across its body, and with every groan of splitting wood, the earth beneath Troy quaked. The ancient warriors seemed to sense it too. They howled, throwing themselves against each other in frenzied violence, as though spilling blood was the only thing holding the prison together. Then came the first whisper. Not in Rick's ears, not in Morty's, but in their heads, seeping through the cracks of their thoughts like smoke through a keyhole. A voice that was not one but many, layered in endless dissonance. "You see it, don't you? The cage, the lie, the war that binds. You know the truth more than they ever could." Morty staggered, clutching his temples. "Rick, I heard something." Rick silenced him with a glare. His own hands trembled, but he shoved them into his lab coat pockets to hide it. The voice continued, a pressure pressing into their skulls. Helen was never the prize. The walls were never the goal. They fought for me, against me. And they are dust now, their sacrifices forgotten, the battlefield convulsed. Dead soldiers lurched to their feet, not alive, not dead, just puppets tugged by invisible strings. Their armor clinked, their hollow faces turned toward Rick and Morty. "But you are not bound by their myths. You are clever. You can open what they could not." Morty whimpered, backing away. Rick's jaw tightened. He understood the danger now. This wasn't just a vision. This was recruitment. The entity inside the horse wasn't showing them history. It was testing them, tempting them, hunting for the cracks in their will. Thunder split the sky, though no storm brewed. The horse groaned louder, a sound like the world's bones breaking. Its eyes glowed with fire not of this realm, casting long shadows that crawled toward them like fingers. Rick spat on the ground, his voice harsh. "Listen up, you eldritch glue factory. I've broken out of worse cages than this. And I'm not about to play errand boy for some cosmic horse demon." But even as he said it, the battlefield shifted, the weight of reality pressing down harder. Rick could feel the pull, a gravitational hunger dragging him toward the horse's chest. Morty screamed as the ground split, flames and void churning beneath, swallowing men, armor, and stone alike. The war was unraveling. The lock was weakening, and Rick realized something chilling. This vision wasn't just pulling them into the past, it was beginning to bleed outward, clawing its way toward the present. The Trojan Horse wasn't opening in Troy, it was opening everywhere. The walls of Troy rose before them, massive and skeletal, their stone faces blackened by fire, yet unbroken by time. They weren't walls built for men. Rick could see that instantly. The angles were wrong, slanted in ways that bent perception, as if the stones themselves were trying to fold inward and collapse into a point that didn't exist. Each block was carved with glyphs older than Greek, older than Babylon, older than Earth's memory. Symbols of binding, of warding, of desperate prayers chiseled by trembling hands. Morty pressed himself against Rick's arm, his eyes wide. The walls pulsed faintly, as though something behind them still breathed. "Rick, the Trojans, they built this to keep the Greeks out, right?" Morty's voice cracked. "But this doesn't feel like that at all." Rick scowled, pulling out a small device from his pocket. It whined as it scanned the structures. The readings surged off the charts, not of stone, not of mortar, but of containment fields buried in time. These weren't walls of defense, Morty. They were walls of worship. Every layer is a seal. Every battle outside these gates was fuel to power the cage. The city groaned as though it heard him. The gates, tall enough to scrape the stars, shuddered, their timbers rattling like bones in the wind. Beyond them, screams echoed, not of soldiers, but of something deeper, something vast. The voice returned, curling around their thoughts. They called this place a city, but it was never meant for men. They built their homes upon the prison's skin. They prayed, they bled, they killed, all for one purpose. Me, Morty covered his ears, but it did nothing. The whispers leaked into his bones. Rick, it knows us. It's talking to us. Rick clenched his teeth, his eyes fixed on the walls. Yeah, and it's trying to sell us a story. Don't listen, but the voice pressed harder. They feared me, yet they fed me. Do you not see the irony? Heroes immortalized, poems sung, yet their war was only chains rattling in the dark. And still I stir. Still I wait. The battlefield twisted again. The Greeks surged toward the walls, their faces distorted, their limbs jerking like marionettes. Each carried torches, each cut their own flesh as they screamed oaths in forgotten tongues. The Trojans answered, their cries no less frantic, their blood pouring into the soil that drank it hungrily. The war wasn't men against men. It was priests against priests, sacrifices feeding a hungry lock. Rick grabbed Morty by the collar and dragged him into the shadow of the walls. We're not here to play history tourists. There's a mechanism here, something keeping us tethered. I need to find it. Morty's knees shook. His gaze lingered on the horse in the distance, its frame now cracked wide enough to reveal slivers of something inside, something writhing, something vast. The ground split beneath them. Out poured molten black liquid, crawling like serpents across the stones. The glyphs on the walls burned red as the ooze touched them, as though the prison itself screamed. Rick slammed a vial into the ground, and a dome of energy flared around them. Morty, listen. That thing in the horse? It's not just playing dress-up with history. It's leaking into us, into our perception. We don't just see Troy, we feel it, because we're the new players on its board. If we don't break free now, we're going to end up as part of the ritual. The voice laughed, a chorus that rattled every bone. Yes, be part of it. You are clever, Rick Sanchez. Clever enough to end the cycle. Clever enough to unseal what men could not. The walls buckled, stones grinding as though something immense pressed against them from the inside. The stars overhead flickered, rearranging themselves into constellations Morty didn't recognize, shapes of teeth, of eyes, of endless mouths. And then came the sound. A heartbeat. Slow, colossal, echoing not in the air but in the marrow of their bones. Rick froze, not because of fear, but because he recognized it. The frequency, the pattern, it wasn't just alive. It was synchronizing. Whatever was inside the horse wasn't just trying to break out, it was trying to merge. The air around them vibrated, a low-frequency hum that seemed to seep into every cell, twisting perception. Rick's hands tightened around his portal gun. Not that it would help here. This wasn't a dimensional jump problem. This was something older, something cosmic, and it had a rhythm that mocked any technology. Morty stumbled, clutching his ears, tears streaming down his face. Rick, it's like it's alive. The horse, it's breathing. Rick gritted his teeth. Yeah, Morty, and the thing inside? It's not just alive, it's aware. And it knows we're here. He glanced at the horse from across the battlefield. The cracks in its wooden frame had widened. Through them, shadows writhed like liquid night, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't human. At last, fresh minds, clever minds, minds that can open the cage. The voice slithered into their consciousness, smooth and cold. Morty shrieked, spinning around, but there was no one. The battlefield itself had started to warp. Soldiers duplicated and twisted in impossible geometries. Walls bending in on themselves as if reality were a flexible skin. Rick pushed Morty behind a pile of rubble, his eyes scanning. It's testing us. It's gauging how smart we are, how strong we are. The horse didn't just trap it. This thing survived because it's sentient, Morty. And sentient things aren't happy being locked up. The horse's chest split wider. Black tendrils crawled outward like rivers of shadow, touching the ground and pulling up warriors, breaking them into screaming shards. Every fragment vanished into the cracks in the battlefield. Morty vomited on the stones, his eyes wide with horror. Do you see? You could end it or join it. Clever one. Will you be a key or a witness? Rick's jaw tightened. I'm not your key, buddy. You don't get to rewrite history with us in it. He stepped forward, pulling a vial of glowing liquid from his coat. Containment formulas? Sure, they won't hold you, but maybe they'll slow you down while I figure the mechanism. He hurled it at the horse. The vial shattered, bathing a section of wood in light that hissed like acid. The shadow tendrils recoiled slightly, writhing back into the frame, but the voice only laughed, layered and infinite. Nice try, clever human. But history is my ally. War is my blood. You think containment can last for eons? I'm older than the stones, older than the sand, older than the names you idolize. I am what they truly feared. Morty staggered, trembling. Rick, what is it? I mean, is it a god? A monster? Something else? Rick shook his head, voice low. It's complicated. I've seen godlike things, Morty, but this? It's not a god. Not really. It's more primal, a thought that took shape, a hunger that became flesh, or whatever this is. And we're inside its playground. The battlefield shivered again, faster this time. Trees and stones warped, the sky rippling like a disturbed pond. Figures emerged from the horse, soldiers but wrong. Their faces melted and reformed, their eyes black pools with pinpoints of distant galaxies inside. They reached for Rick and Morty with hands that were human-shaped, but impossibly long, impossibly flexible. Rick pulled a small device from his belt, pressing a sequence of buttons. A field of blue energy flickered around them, briefly pushing the shadow soldiers back. The horse groaned, a sound like mountains collapsing and oceans screaming all at once. You can't stop what's coming. The lock is fraying, the war is never ending, and now... You belong to the game. Rick glanced at Morty. Listen, Morty, there's a reason the Greeks and Trojans died in this loop. Every battle, every death, it was feeding the seal. But now the seal's failing. And the thing inside, it's learning. The heartbeat grew louder, resonating through the stones and sand, shaking their teeth. Shadows began crawling along the walls of Troy, forming letters that shifted too fast to read. Rick squinted. He saw a pattern, a sequence of glyphs, a key buried in chaos, maybe a way to fight back. The cage weakens. Will you end it or free it? Rick's hand tightened around Morty's shoulder. We're not ending it yet, but we're not letting it out either. Gotta figure the lock first. And Morty, this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about the truth of history. And some truths will make your skull implode. Morty shivered, but he nodded weakly. Okay, Rick, I trust you. The horse heaved, a giant breath of darkness, and the battlefield trembled as if the entire world were bending toward the chest of the beast, and somewhere deep inside, something ancient stirred, aware that new players had entered the arena. The battlefield shifted beneath Rick and Morty. The ground no longer solid, but a trembling sea of broken earth and molten black veins. Shadows writhed like living liquid, seeking purchase on anything that moved. The horse loomed ahead, its wooden panels splitting wider, revealing glimpses of a vast void inside, where something immense and impossible twisted in darkness. Rick crouched low, scanning the glyphs etched into the walls of Troy. Every symbol pulsed with an eerie rhythm, as if reading their minds, cataloging their fear and curiosity. Morty, these symbols aren't decoration, he muttered. They're part of a ritual. And from what I can tell, every death on this battlefield feeds it. Morty's eyes darted around nervously. He had stopped noticing individual soldiers or corpses. Everything was a blur, an endless tide of flesh, armor and blood flowing toward the horse. as though the entire war existed solely to feed whatever slept inside. The voice came again, this time calmer, almost seductive. You understand now. The Greeks, the Trojans, they were never players, only ingredients. Their fear, their hate, their slaughter, all feeding the chain that keeps me imprisoned. And now, you stand at the edge of choice. Rick's eyes narrowed. Choice? Yeah, buddy, I'm pretty sure you're going to get none of mine. He turned to Morty. Listen, Morty, that thing inside the horse, it's not just aware, it's adaptive. Every strategy we've used, every trick, every containment formula, it studies us, learns from us, and twists it against us. It's not a war we can fight with guns or explosions. We need a plan that targets its mind, its core. And I think I know where to start. Morty swallowed hard. Rick, we're talking about a thing that feeds on death and fear, right? And you want to fight it with its own battlefield? Rick gave a grim smile. Exactly, Morty. If it's powered by this war, then we don't destroy it. We rewrite it, feed it, something else. The horse shuddered violently, black tendrils whipping outward like serpents. They lashed at the air, colliding with invisible barriers, leaving scorch marks on the battlefield. The dead soldiers rose again, this time synchronized, their movements eerily precise. Morty froze as one approached him, head tilting unnaturally, eyes black voids filled with stars. The ritual cannot be broken by cowardice. Only the clever, only the daring, only those who see beyond the veil may challenge me, Rick muttered under his breath, adjusting a dial on a device that glowed with blue light. Beyond the veil, that's the trick, Morty. We can't just survive this. We need to manipulate it. Every death, every fear. We can turn it into leverage, reverse the flow. Morty's stomach churned. Rick, leverage. Reverse the flow. Rick ignored him, focusing on the horse. It's trapped in a cycle. Every soul, every scream, every pulse of fear, it all feeds the lock, keeps it contained. If we can disrupt the pattern, we can weaken it, maybe even trap it permanently. But first, we have to get inside. The horse's chest split even further. Darkness spilled out like a living tide, engulfing soldiers, terrain, and even the stars overhead. Rick grabbed Morty's hand and leapt into the void, the world collapsing around them. Gravity twisted, their bodies falling and spinning as the battlefield dissolved into streams of light and shadow. Inside the horse, the air was thick, heavy with a scent that was part ozone, part iron, part decay. Tendrils of darkness coiled around them, probing, testing, whispering unintelligible promises of power and pain. Rick pressed a button on his wrist device, and a dome of protective energy flared around them, keeping the worst of the shadows at bay. Clever, clever. You may reach the core, but understand this. The ritual is eternal. The war is eternal. The hunger is eternal. Rick glared into the darkness. Yeah, we've heard that one before. Eternal? You're not getting the last word today. Morty swallowed hard, gripping Rick's arm. Rick, what happens if we fail? Rick's face hardened. Then we become part of it. Another cycle, another offering, another set of sacrifices in a war no one remembers. But we're not failing, Morty, not today. Not while I can think. The shadows hissed and twisted, forming a stairway of writhing black up to a chamber at the horse's core. Rick and Morty ascended, every step accompanied by the faint whisper of thousands of voices, the energy of countless deaths and endless battles pressing down like a storm. And at the top, they saw it. The core was not flesh, not metal, not even entirely material. It was a knot of living darkness, a mass of eyes and mouths, ever shifting and aware, pulsing in time with the heartbeat that had brought them here. The entity recognized them instantly, and its presence slammed into their minds, a psychic hurricane of hunger and intelligence. You came to play the game. Clever, yes! But even cleverness has its price. Rick swallowed, heart pounding. All right, Morty, here's the part where we see if brains can beat blood and fear. Morty's knees shook, but he followed, stepping closer to the darkness at the center of the horse, toward a secret no mortal or Greek was ever meant to witness. The core of the horse pulsed with a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the world itself. Rick and Morty stood at the edge of a vast chamber, the walls dissolving into swirling darkness, stretching infinitely in every direction. Shadows coiled and uncoiled, forming fleeting shapes of warriors, gods, and creatures that defied description. Each figure's eyes glimmered with intelligence, and some seemed to recognize Rick and Morty as though they had been expected all along. Morty whispered, his voice trembling. "Rick, what is this place? It's alive, isn't it?" Rick's eyes narrowed, scanning the pulsing darkness. "Not alive, Morty, sentient, strategic, predatory. This thing didn't just survive all these centuries. It's been planning." He stepped closer, hand hovering over his wrist device. The horse was the lock. Troy was the containment ritual. Every death, every scream, every little bit of fear, it fed the seal. And now it's cracking, and it's learning from us. The core shifted as if acknowledging his words. Black tendrils extended, wrapping around spaces where they hadn't been a moment before, probing. The whispers returned, a chorus of impossibly layered voices. "So, the clever ones have arrived. You who see beyond the veil. You who dare touch what mortals may never understand. Come closer. Feel the pattern. Become part of it." Morty flinched. "I don't want to, Rick. This is insane." Rick grabbed him by the shoulders, forcing him to meet his gaze. "Morty, if we don't play this right, we're not leaving. Not Troy, not this timeline, not anywhere. The horse doesn't just hold something inside. It hunts for minds it can bend to its will. And right now, it's choosing whether you're prey or pawn." A tendril lashed out suddenly, brushing past Morty's arm. It wasn't solid, yet it carried a tangible cold that seeped into his bones. The whispers pressed harder. "Clever, yes. But cleverness alone will not save you. You must see the design. You must touch the pattern, or be consumed." Rick clenched his fists, a plan forming. "All right, Morty, listen. You see those glyphs on the walls? Every one of them is part of the containment algorithm. The horse, the war, the chaos, it's all data. We can't fight this thing with strength. We fight it with logic. We turn the ritual on itself," Morty swallowed, trying to steady his shaking legs. "Logic against this?" He gestured toward the writhing darkness, where shapes of warriors and monsters coalesced and split apart endlessly. Rick gritted his teeth. "Yeah, Morty, the biggest mistake anyone ever made with this thing was thinking it was unbreakable. Everything alive or sentient has a weak point, and this, it's prideful. It relies on patterns, on repetition. We disrupt that, we disrupt the flow, and we may just trap it before it fully escapes." The horse groaned, an impossibly deep sound that seemed to resonate through every molecule around them. Its heartbeat accelerated, pulsing in sync with their own. The shadows swirled faster, forming a vortex that pulled them slightly forward. Rick grabbed Morty and activated his device, a lattice of blue energy snapping into place, holding them steady. "Ah, clever. But are you clever enough? Can you endure the truth? The war, the sacrifice, the hunger that shaped history itself?" Rick glared at the pulsing darkness. "Oh, I can endure, buddy, and I can manipulate. Let's see how you like being the puzzle for once." Morty shivered. "Rick, it's looking at us. I can feel it in my head, everywhere." Rick's jaw tightened. "Good, then we're doing this right. Feeling it means it's learning about us. We use that. We trick it into patterns it expects, then we break them. Mess with its algorithm. Feed it chaos instead of war. Confuse it, Morty. Confuse it and trap it." The core pulsed violently, shadows twisting into impossible forms. Eyes appeared everywhere, staring into their souls, some human, some alien, all infinite. The voice returned, now layered with something darker, a presence beneath the chorus that thrummed like the heartbeat itself. "You will fail. You will become data. You will serve the cycle." Rick smirked, the first sign of grim amusement since entering the horse. Yeah, we've heard that before. But the cycle isn't eternal, buddy. Not if I have a say. Not if I break the algorithm from the inside." Morty clenched his fists, teeth grinding. "Rick, I don't know if I can do this." Rick gripped his shoulder firmly. "You can, Morty, you have to. Because if we don't, the horse doesn't just stay in Troy, it comes out. It spreads, and if it ever hits the real universe, Morty, No one's writing poems about that war. They're writing obituaries for the cosmos. The heartbeat grew louder, resonating through the shadows and the walls, faster now, as though the entity knew its prey had finally understood the game. Rick took a deep breath, eyes narrowing, and stepped forward toward the central knot of darkness, ready to engage in a battle not of fists or lasers, but of wits, cunning, and terrifying intellect. The horse pulsed, shadows quivering, and the whispers became a roar. Welcome to the true Trojan War. Rick and Morty stepped deeper into the core of the horse, the shadows thickening around them like living smoke. The floor beneath their feet shifted and warped, sometimes solid, sometimes dissolving into a pit of writhing darkness that seemed intent on swallowing them whole. The whispers were constant now, a chorus of thousands of voices, speaking simultaneously, yet each word understandable, each syllable a clawing thread into their minds. Welcome to my heart. Clever children of fleeting stars, you think you can walk through fire and not burn? Morty stumbled, gripping Rick's arm. Rick, this place, it's like it knows everything we think. I can't keep it out of my head. Rick didn't respond. His eyes flicked from glyph to glyph, the faint glow of alien symbols reflecting in his pupils. It does know everything we think, Morty, he muttered, but that's its weakness. It can predict patterns, yes, but it can't predict chaos. And we're about to give it chaos. The shadows around them began to form shapes, ancient Greek soldiers, Trojan defenders, warriors melting into skeletal forms, their faces contorted in agony. They weren't just illusions. Each seemed to echo a memory, a fragment of every death that had fed the horse over centuries. Morty recoiled. I don't think I can do this, Rick. I can't. Rick cut him off sharply. Yes, you can. That's why you're here. Every second we hesitate, the thing inside learns more. Every heartbeat you waste listening to its whispers is another chain tightening. We either move forward, Morty, or we're next in the pile. As they moved, the horse's core shifted again. Walls of shadow became corridors. Corridors became open skies of void, stars twisting in impossible geometry. Time itself seemed fractured. They could hear echoes of screams from centuries past, feel the pulse of battles yet to come. Then came the first direct manifestation of the entity. A massive figure emerged from the shadows, impossibly tall, with eyes like black suns and a mouth stretching across its face, teeth glinting like shards of reality. Its form flickered and multiplied, each iteration as real as the last. You dare approach me? Rick raised a small glowing device, his fingers dancing over buttons and dials. Yeah, we dare, he said. And we brought your first lesson. Prediction only works if you assume the rules. You forgot that part, didn't you? The figure recoiled slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. It wasn't used to being confronted, only obeyed, only fed. The horse's heart thrummed faster, and the shadows writhed violently. Morty swallowed, terror written across his face. Rick, it's huge, and it's smart. Rick gritted his teeth. Yeah, Morty, that's the problem. And the solution. You see, brains beat brawn if you know the algorithm. This thing runs on a pattern. War, death, sacrifice. Everything has a sequence. We're going to disrupt it, feed it false input, make it think the loop is still working when it's breaking down. The entity laughed, or rather, the entire chamber seemed to laugh through it. A sound like grinding stone cracking ice, and whispering screams all at once. Shadows snapped into the shape of a labyrinth, twisting in on itself, corridors folding back endlessly, impossible to navigate by sight alone. Fools. You think intellect can cage infinity? You think the cleverness of mortals can trap what devours stars? Rick didn't flinch. Morty, stay close. Remember the glyphs. Every symbol here, every pattern, it's all connected. The horse isn't just a container, it's a system. And every system has a bug. Every bug has an exploit. We find it, we hit it, we collapse this place from the inside. Morty's voice trembled. And if we fail? Rick's jaw tightened. Then we die. Or worse, Morty, become part of the ritual. Become fuel for the next 100 generations of fools who think history is safe. And you know what? I've had enough of being fuel. The labyrinth shifted again, this time faster, the shadows forming corridors that spiraled downward into the horse's core. The entity's voice layered over itself, thousands of voices overlapping, clever, daring, brave. You will see how fragile cleverness is when the past itself reaches out to tear your mind apart. Rick gripped Morty's shoulder, eyes locked on the shifting paths ahead. Hold on tight, Morty. This is where the war becomes personal. The horse isn't just history. It's alive, and it thinks it owns us. Time to remind it who's smarter. The floor buckled beneath them, the shadows snapping upward like jagged teeth. The heartbeat of the horse thrummed violently, louder than before, echoing in their bones. They stepped forward into the first true test of the labyrinth, a passage that could either lead them to the core or consume them entirely. Rick and Morty advanced through the labyrinthine interior of the horse, each step echoing against walls that weren't really walls, but pulsing, living shadows. The black tendrils that formed corridors twisted, coiled, and sometimes tried to wrap around them, probing for fear. Morty stumbled several times, almost slipping into voids that seemed to open beneath his feet, only to be yanked back by Rick's firm grip. This place. It's alive, Rick, Morty whispered, voice shaking. I can feel it thinking, like it knows what we're going to do next. Rick didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned every glyph and pattern along the shifting corridors, muttering calculations under his breath. That's the point, Morty. It does know what we're going to do, unless we make it impossible to know. Patterns are predictable. Chaos. No, chaos isn't. The shadows twisted into shapes of soldiers again, but these were closer, more vivid. Faces filled with anguish, their eyes screaming, mouths moving in silent pleas. Some reached toward Rick and Morty with hands that elongated impossibly, stretching and curling around nothing tangible. Morty flinched. Rick, they're real, aren't they? Like real spirits or something. Rick shook his head. No, Morty, they're data. The horse consumes history, every death, every scream, every act of war, and stores it here. These forms? Projections of the collected memories. The horse isn't haunted. It's a library. And a predator. The whispers returned, faint at first, then growing into a deafening chorus. Welcome. Clever ones! Children of fleeting stars. Do you understand the price? The war, the blood, the sacrifice. It never ends, it only accumulates. And you are part of it. Morty stumbled again, this time falling to his knees. Rick, I can't. It's too much. I can feel all the fear, all the pain, all the deaths. Rick knelt beside him, placing a hand firmly on Morty's shoulder. Morty, that's exactly what it wants. It feeds on despair, on hesitation. If you let it consume you, it wins. But we're not here to feed it. We're here to break it. A massive shadow coalesced before them, taller than any wall, wider than the corridor, its surface rippling with countless faces, screaming silently. It towered over them, and its presence pressed down like gravity multiplied by fear. The clever ones, daring, you may attempt, but understand, history itself will resist you. Rick's eyes narrowed. History doesn't resist, buddy. People resist. And even better, we rewrite it from the inside. He pulled a small device from his coat, a glowing sphere of energy with intricate circuits humming with blue light. This is a temporal disruptor, Morty. We're not just walking through the horse, we're injecting chaos into its system. Every pulse, every scream it feeds on. We're flipping it. Morty's eyes went wide. We're gonna mess with the core? Rick, that sounds insane, Rick smirked grimly. Insane? Maybe, but it's the only way. The horse thinks it's the master of its own system. Let's show it how wrong it is. The shadow tower groaned, tendrils lashing out to intercept them, but Rick activated the disruptor. A wave of blue energy pulsed outward, causing the shadows to recoil, twisting violently as if in pain. The whispers erupted into a cacophony of rage and confusion, overlapping with the core's heartbeat, now faster than ever, thrumming in their bones. You cannot stop me! Rick glanced at Morty, determination burning in his eyes. Yes, we can, Morty. And every step we take, every pulse of this disruptor, we're breaking the rhythm. We're taking the war away from it. Morty gulped, teeth chattering. Rick, it's screaming. All of it, inside my head. Rick's hand tightened around his shoulder. Good. That means it's feeling real chaos. That's the key. Hold on tight, Morty. Things are about to get worse. And we're going to make it pay for every death it's ever consumed. The corridor shifted again, the walls twisting into impossible angles, leading them deeper into the horse, closer to the very heart of the entity that had turned history itself into a prison. And at the end of the path, the core pulsed brighter, the black mass writhing with anticipation, sensing the threat for the first time in millennia. Rick and Morty finally stepped into the heart of the horse's labyrinth. The darkness here was thick, almost viscous, moving like a liquid with a mind of its own. Every shadow pulse felt like a heartbeat, and every heartbeat resonated through their bones. The walls, if they could still be called walls, shifted constantly, forming impossible geometries that made Morty's stomach churn. Morty whispered, trembling, "Rick, I can feel it everywhere. In my head, in my bones. It's looking at me." Rick's eyes scanned the writhing darkness. "That's because it is, Morty. Every thought, every instinct it knows. That's how it survived millennia. That's why the horse was built, why Troy was its cage. This thing isn't just alive, it's aware. And aware things don't just sit still." The entity revealed itself slowly. Tendrils of black shadow rose, forming into shapes, soldiers, gods, monstrous hybrids, all contorted with agony. Yet their movements were precise, intelligent. In the center, a massive core floated, a pulsing mass of eyes and teeth, black voids filled with alien galaxies. It was watching them, calculating, understanding, predicting, clever, daring, persistent. You think your tricks can match an eternity of war, an infinity of fear? Rick adjusted his wrist device, the temporal disruptor humming with energy. Predictive, yes. But patterns only work if you're predictable, buddy. That's your flaw. He turned to Morty. "Morty, remember what I said. We inject chaos. We break its loop. Everything it's fed on, the fear, the blood, the endless deaths, we turn it back on the system." Morty gulped, heart pounding. "Rick, you sure this won't just make it mad or stronger?" Rick smirked grimly. "It's already mad, Morty. We just make it busy. Busy enough to make mistakes." The core pulsed violently, shadows lashing outward, striking at the walls, at the floor, at Rick and Morty themselves. Morty ducked instinctively, feeling the cold tendrils brush past him like knives, whispering names of the dead. Each pulse of the entity's heartbeat amplified the whispers, layering memories of every life lost in the Trojan War into a cacophony of agony. Do you understand the ritual? The war? The endless cycle? All these deaths, all these screams. They are my sustenance. And now you dare to touch me." Rick's eyes glimmered with resolve. "Yeah, we dare. And every ounce of this ritual, every pulse, every death, it's data. And we know how to mess with data, Morty. Chaos, remember. Confusion is our weapon." Morty nodded weakly, trying to steady his shaking hands. "Chaos, I can try." The tendrils of darkness recoiled slightly, reacting to the disruptor. The whispers became a roar, overlapping voices of soldiers, priests, and unseen horrors from countless worlds. The core pulsed faster, shaking the labyrinth itself, folding space and time within its influence. Rick stepped forward, pressing a sequence on his device. Blue energy flared, illuminating the chamber with harsh, bright light. Shadows hissed and twisted, writhing violently as though burned by the radiance. "You cannot stop the ritual. You cannot break the cycle." Rick gritted his teeth. "Maybe not alone, buddy. But we've got a mind, a plan, and the element of surprise. And that's more than you're expecting." Morty's stomach churned as the core pulsed again, faster, the tendrils writhing in anticipation. "Rick, it's coming at us. I can feel it." Rick grabbed him, holding tight. "Then we let it come, Morty. Let it see us. Let it learn. And then we hit it where it's blind. The horse thinks it's eternal. Let's prove it wrong." The core's pulsing accelerated, faster than the rhythm of any heartbeat, resonating through the entire labyrinth. Shadows stretched and contorted, forming a swirling vortex around Rick and Morty. The whispers overlapped with a single clear thought, a command directed straight at their minds. Join or be consumed. Rick's fingers tightened around the disruptor. Neither. Not today. Not while I'm here. Let's rewrite history. And with that, he activated the device fully. Blue energy erupted, engulfing the tendrils, cracking the labyrinth, and sending waves of chaotic light through the horse. The core roared, a sound that shook the very fabric of reality. Eyes blinking in alien patterns as it tried to adapt. Morty screamed, both in terror and exhilaration. Rick, it's hurting. It's reacting. Rick grinned, teeth flashing. Exactly, Morty. That's the first step. Chaos in a system like this. It can't handle it forever. Keep moving. Keep confusing it. And maybe, just maybe, we can trap it before it's too late. The core throbbed, massive and menacing. Yet there was a shimmer of instability now, an anomaly born from Rick's defiance, and from Morty's shaky courage, and deep within, the horse's heart knew for the first time in millennia, it might not win. The core of the horse pulsed violently, each beat shaking the labyrinth to its foundations. Tendrils of black shadow whipped outward, slicing through corridors, walls, and even fragments of the battlefield memory, searching for any vulnerability. Rick and Morty stood firm within the protective dome of the disruptor, the blue energy flaring brighter with every pulse. Morty gritted his teeth, heart pounding. Rick, it's fighting back. I can feel it in my bones. Rick's eyes were sharp, calculating. Of course it is, Morty. That's how intelligent predators work. They learn, they adapt. But predators also have blind spots. Every system, no matter how perfect, can't account for chaos. That's what we're giving it. The shadows recoiled as the disruptor pulsed again, feeding waves of unpredictable energy into the core. The labyrinth trembled, twisting violently, corridors folding into themselves as if reality were being rewritten. The eyes within the horse's heart flickered, confused, unable to pass the onslaught of data. Fools. You think you can disrupt the ritual? You think cleverness can undo millennia of sacrifice? Rick smirked grimly. Yeah, we do. Because cleverness beats obsession every time. Morty's stomach churned as another wave of whispers washed over him. They weren't just echoes of soldiers now, they were memories. Fragments of lives trapped in the horse, twisting with horror and despair. Morty wanted to scream, to run, but Rick held him steady. Morty, focus. The pattern, the rhythm, it's reacting to our chaos. That's the crack. That's what we exploit. A tendril lashed toward them, thicker and faster than any before. Rick extended his disruptor, flaring energy outward. The shadow screamed, or maybe it was a collective scream of all the lives inside the horse, and recoiled. A sharp crack echoed through the core, like wood splintering, and for the first time, a small fissure appeared in the black mass of the core itself. Morty gasped. Rick, did we do that? Rick nodded, teeth clenched. That, Morty, is the first crack. That's what I've been waiting for. The horse isn't invincible. It's powerful, yes, but every machine, every system has a weakness. That fissure, it's the beginning. The core pulsed erratically now, tendrils thrashing wildly, unable to contain the disruptor's unpredictable energy. The labyrinth itself shuddered, corridors folding, walls bending, reality itself trying to stabilize. Shadows screamed in unison, a sound that would have driven lesser minds insane. Impossible. Impossible. You cannot break what binds eternity. Rick stepped closer to the fissure, studying the writhing mass. It thinks it's eternal because no one's ever challenged it from the inside. But that's our advantage. Every pulse, every scream it fed on, we're flipping it. Every life it consumed, we're turning it against itself. Morty's eyes widened, staring into the heart of the darkness. Rick, it's looking at us. It knows we're doing this. Rick grinned. Exactly, Morty, let it see. Let it think it's winning. That's when we hit the next part of the plan. The fissure grew, a jagged line splitting the core, pulsing with blue energy that mirrored the disruptor. Shadows writhed, tendrils striking out at random, but each strike was less precise, more chaotic. The core's heartbeat faltered slightly, the rhythm no longer steady, its control over the labyrinth weakening. Morty swallowed hard. Rick, it's cracking. Really cracking. Rick's eyes sparkled with grim satisfaction. Yeah, Morty, the first crack is always the hardest. Now we just push. We keep the chaos coming, disrupt the rhythm, confuse the pattern, and we turn this prison into its own trap. The horse's core pulsed violently, but for the first time, a note of uncertainty threaded through the chorus of voices. The whispers faltered, the shadows twitched, and the labyrinth quivered, hinting at instability. Rick and Morty stood at the edge of the fissure, energy flaring, ready to press forward into the heart of the horse, knowing the first crack was only the beginning of a battle that could consume them, or the cosmos itself. The labyrinth trembled beneath Rick and Morty as the fissure in the core widened. Shadows writhed violently, their forms splitting and reforming into grotesque mockeries of the warriors who had once died for Troy. The screams that filled the air were not just noise, they were the psychic imprints of countless deaths, each pulse of the horse's heart amplifying the torment. Morty pressed himself against Rick, teeth chattering. Rick, it's screaming at us. Not with sound, but inside my head. All of them, all the dead. Rick's eyes scanned the churning darkness, calculating. Morty, that's exactly what I want you to feel. Every scream, every fear, it's all data. It wants you terrified, wants you frozen. But fear can be weaponized. Chaos can be turned back against it. The fissure pulsed again, glowing blue from the disruptor's influence, and for the first time, the shadows recoiled in disorder, no longer synchronized. The core's rhythm wavered, the heartbeat stuttering. The labyrinth walls themselves seemed to shiver, shifting unpredictably, as if the very architecture of the horse was rebelling against the intrusion. Clever. Insolent. You think the sacrifices of millennia mean nothing? Rick growled under his breath. Sacrifices mean nothing if you can't feed the system anymore. Every pulse it thinks it controls, every scream it counts. We're flipping it, Morty, turning its own energy against it. The horse's voice, now layered with thousands of echoes, surged into a roar, reverberating through the labyrinth. Shadows shot toward them, tendrils striking at impossible angles. Rick activated the disruptor's secondary frequency, causing a shockwave that scattered the tendrils and froze some in midair, crackling with energy. Morty screamed, ducking as a shadow that looked like a twisted Greek soldier lunged past him. Rick, I can't. It's everywhere. Rick gritted his teeth. Exactly, Morty. Everywhere is exactly where we need it to be. That's the chaos. Keep moving. Feed it unpredictability. Let it see us survive. The fissure widened further, and through the gaps, Rick could glimpse the entity's core, an endless tangle of eyes and mouths, pulsing in time with the heartbeat of history itself. It thrashed violently, the black mass lashing out tendrils that shredded the very fabric of the labyrinth. The war, the cycle, the sacrifice. You cannot end it. Rick's jaw tightened. Maybe not all of it, buddy, but we're breaking your grip. Every pulse we disrupt, every pattern we scramble. It's one step closer to the trap. Morty shivered, feeling the weight of every life consumed by the horse pressing on him. Rick, it's like the fallen are breathing through me. Their pain, their fear. Rick nodded grimly. That's right, Morty, and that's why we push forward. We don't stop. We use their energy. Every echo, every memory feeds our plan, not theirs. The fissure is the crack in their armor. The chaos is our weapon. And the horse is about to learn that the cleverest predators can be outsmarted. The labyrinth quaked again, corridors folding in impossible geometries. Shadows screamed, writhed, and twisted, forming shapes that were familiar yet alien. Trojan soldiers with faces replaced by eyes, Greek warriors with mouths screaming infinity. The core pulsed faster, the heartbeat accelerating as the entities struggled to maintain control. Rick tightened his grip on Morty's shoulder. Morty, hold on. The next step is going to be worse than this. But if we survive it, we push the horse to the edge. And trust me, Nothing, not even history itself, will see it coming. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, the shadows convulsing violently, and the fissure in the core began to glow with blinding blue light. The first crack was no longer small. It was the beginning of a rift that threatened to unravel the very prison that had contained the horse for millennia. And in the eye of the storm, Rick and Morty braced themselves for the next, most dangerous part of the battle, confronting the entity itself at its heart, where the line between history, death, and chaos blurred into a single infinite nightmare. The fissure in the horse's core widened, glowing a blinding blue as Rick's disruptor pulsed in sync with it. Shadows writhed violently, thrashing and splitting, unable to maintain cohesion. The entity's heartbeat, once steady and all-consuming, now faltered, skipping in erratic, uneven pulses. Morty's knees shook, heart hammering. "Rick, it's really breaking." Rick's eyes glittered with grim satisfaction. "Yeah, Morty, that's the point. Chaos beats control. Every pattern it relied on, we've scrambled it. Every scream it fed on, we've inverted it. And now, it's unraveling." The black tendrils lashed outward, striking at nothing, collapsing into themselves as the disruptor's energy created unpredictable interference. Shadows shrieked, faces of long-dead soldiers melting into nothing, their memories dissipating like smoke in a storm. "You cannot end the war, you fools," Rick grinned, voice sharp. "Oh, we can, buddy. We're doing it right now." He gestured at Morty. "Keep pushing the device. Every pulse, every ounce of chaos you feed it, it weakens its hold." Morty clenched his hands around the disruptor, focusing. The horse's labyrinth twisted violently around them, corridors folding and unfolding as the entity tried to stabilize itself. But the fissure expanded, the blue light consuming the darkness, revealing glimpses of the war beneath, the true horror of history. The Greeks and Trojans weren't just fighting each other. Their battle was orchestrated by the horse, every act of bloodshed feeding the cosmic prison that now shrieked and writhed before them. Morty staggered back, stomach churning. "Rick, all of this. It was for this? The horse, it fed on all of them." Rick nodded grimly. "Every war, Morty, every sacrifice, every horror, it wasn't meaningless. It was sustenance for something older, smarter, and far more terrifying than anyone could imagine." The core pulsed violently one last time. Then as the disruptor emitted a final, blinding surge, the entity screamed, not a sound, but a psychic roar that shook the very fabric of the horse. Tendrils writhed and then snapped, shadows collapsing into the fissure. The labyrinth trembled violently, then began to stabilize, the corridors straightening, the impossible geometries dissolving. The horse itself trembled, a final quiver, and then fell silent. The heartbeat that had haunted centuries faded into nothingness. Morty collapsed to the ground, trembling, trying to catch his breath. It's over, Rick." Rick lowered the disruptor, sweat on his brow, but a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Over, maybe, for now. But don't get too comfortable. Things like this, they leave echoes, memories, systems, loops, and the horse. It might have friends." The shadows had dissipated. The labyrinth within the horse was no longer alive, only the empty husk of a vessel. Rick and Morty stood amid faint echoes of the war, twisted fragments of walls, broken armor, whispers that had lost all force. Morty's voice was hoarse. "Rick, everything we saw, all those deaths, it wasn't just history, it was a prison." Rick nodded, looking at the fissured core. "Exactly, Morty. The horse trapped something that shouldn't exist in a single place, and history became the leash. We didn't just see Troy. We saw the machinery behind history, the sacrifices, the fear, the obsession that kept a monster alive for millennia." Morty shivered. "So, the Greeks and Trojans, they were fuel?" "Not just fuel," Rick said, voice low. "They were threads in a web, and we just snipped the web at the right point. But remember, this isn't the only web. History has many cages, Morty. Many monsters hidden behind stories and myths. Some of them we might not be able to stop next time." The room, or whatever remained of the horse, began to shimmer and fade. The ruins of Troy, the battlefield, even the labyrinth dissolved into the vision. Rick tapped his portal gun. Time to go home. Get some real air. Maybe watch some cartoons. Or, whatever humans do to pretend history isn't this horrifying. Morty swallowed, looking back at the fading echoes of the horse. Rick, do you think there are more like it? Rick's grin was dark but amused. Oh, Morty, there always are. But for now, we survived, and surviving is half the battle. They stepped through the portal. Behind them, the echoes of the Trojan War and the cosmic horror of the horse lingered in the shadows. A reminder that history is rarely what it seems, and that the past often hides terrors no myth could fully explain. And somewhere, deep in the void between stars and stories, the heartbeat of other cages, other monsters, continued to thrum, waiting.